Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our Raw Reactions interview series. I'm joined by a fantastic guest to talk about the up-to-date Arsenal occurrences and react to them in our, well, usually it's a more of a happy way, but things are going, it could drop a little. So I'm hoping my guest can pep me up. It's Andrew, Arseblog. How you doing, mate? Are you well?
Hey, Tom, I'm okay. Yeah, how's it going?
Yes, good, thank you. Very, very good. Surviving day by day and making the most of it. So, yeah.
Sure. What else can
Let's.
you do?
I mean, yeah, exactly. What else can you do? So let's crack straight on with it and talk about the most recent news. What's nice about this news is hopefully it's the last time we have to kind of talk about it for a bit, and that's Mesut Ozil's exclusion from the Premier League squad. It was kind of coming. He was not in the Europa League squad. It didn't seem that he would get suddenly picked for the Premier League squad. But what's your reaction to it, really?
Just not surprised. There's no surprise. I think the Europa League squad decision gave us a good idea of what Mikel Arteta was thinking. The squads he's picked so far this season for all the games that we've played have given a good idea of what he's thinking. It's like you, I hope it sort of puts an end to some of the stuff that we hear about it, at least in the media, because you can't keep asking Mikel Arteta why Mesut Ozil is not in the squad when he can't be in the squad. So from that point of view, but I do think it's going to be something that continues to rumble on online, if you like. There'll be a lot of chatter. If we don't create 17 chances and we get done on XG, in a game, you can imagine people will be saying, well, Mesut Ozil is the guy who would have made it all better. I'm not necessarily sure I buy into that, but I think that's just part and parcel of human nature. It's sort of like, isn't it, when a player gets injured and in all the time that he's out, he develops qualities that he didn't necessarily have when he was fit. People sort of attribute a greater quality to them. I think it'll be a little bit like that, but that's inevitable, I think, because, he does have a contract. I mean, beyond that, what more can we say about a situation? It's in some ways a real shame, I think, that Arsenal are unable, or whatever it is. I don't know if it's unable, but we have a player earning a lot of money and Socrates earns a lot of money, and we're not getting any value for that money on the pitch. Even if Ozil is not the guy for the future and Socrates is not the guy for the future, it seems some waste of resources that we're not getting anything out of them. But at the end of the day, it's no surprise that both players have been left out, and we have to just kind of move on now and concentrate on the players that we have.
I love the way that you put it about the qualities players gain once they've not been in the team, and suddenly we're missing all this creativity. Well, Mesut Ozil must be that guy that can come in and solve all of our dreams. But yeah, it is weird, and as you say, a little bit sad that his time at Arsenal seemingly will come to end in such a way. There was a little bit of insight that came from Per Mertesacker. I don't know if you saw it. He was on a podcast discussing Ozil, and he talked about how his focus may have changed since getting married and having a family. And a lot of footballers have families and are married. Is that a little strange to kind of bring it up in that way?
I don't know. I mean, because we're only getting a snippet from a podcast that was in German, so it's difficult to read too much into it. What I'd say is, that Mesut Ozil is now 32. He's coming towards the end of his career anyway. He might well have lost some focus or motivation because of his age, because I think as well, he's a guy who pretty much won it all very early in his career. He won the World Cup. He won trophies with Real Madrid. He won trophies with Arsenal. And maybe there's an element of that. So I don't really know too much about what's going on off the pitch, but it might just be part and parcel of being the age that he is, and maybe just not being as into the game as he used to be. I don't know if that's the case. I think Mertesacker also said that, he trains well, he seems happy, etc., etc. But clearly what he does or what he can bring to the team isn't what Mikel Arteta wants. And I know there's a lot of talk about other reasons as to why he might not be included. I just feel like if Mikel Arteta thought Mesut Ozil was useful to him on a football level, he would pick him.
Yeah.
I really do. Because there's no question. Nobody can question the talent. Nobody can question the technique and the ability that he has. Particularly for a team that is in need of some creativity. So I don't think we should look beyond what Mikel Arteta wants from his players day in, day out, and on the pitch when the games are played.
You mentioned Socrates was left out. Someone else that was left out of the Europa League squad was William Saliba, which of course that squad was submitted well in advance of the Premier League squad, and he can still play in the Premier League if need be, due to his age. But it was kind of expected that he might leave towards the end of the window. That didn't materialise for whatever reason, and now he looks to be a player that will probably be used mostly in the under-23s. He played against Manchester United in the 3-3 draw. We've got a lot of defenders coming back in Murray and Mustafi and Chambers, maybe more of a later extent. But it looks like minutes in the first team are going to be sparse, if any. Wesley Fofana joined Leicester for £40 million, played with Saliba at Saint Etienne and has gone straight into their team. And I've seen a lot of reaction to that being, well, if Fofana can play there, why can't Saliba play at Arsenal? What do you kind of make of the whole situation?
I think it's a shame that he's not in the Europa League squad, because even this week we could use him. We could use a player because we've only got a couple of central defenders fit, because Holding is injured, Chambers, Mustafi, Murray still out, and of course Socrates can't play. I'm a little surprised, to be honest, that he's not been more involved. I'm surprised. I think maybe the exclusion from the Europa League squad was because we were thinking of sending him out on loan.
Yeah.
And we did have that restriction, with non-homegrown players. We had to only pick 17, I think it was, for the Europa League squad, and he didn't get the exemption for being under 21 because he hasn't been at the club for 2 years. Yeah. So it is a bit of a shame, though, because these are the kind of games which you could really have a good look at him in. If he's played for Saint Etienne, if he's played alongside the guy who's gone to Leicester, there's no reason why he couldn't play in games against Rapid Vienna, Dundalk, and Molde. So, that is a bit of a shame. I am a little worried, I have to say, that we were willing to loan him out again. I know he had an injury hit season, but part of the reason we didn't want him to play in the French Cup final was because we wanted to manage his fitness and look after him and look after the injuries. So I think you have to look at what Mikel Arteta has said about him more than once, which is that it's a very difficult position to play in. He's only 19. He's coming to a big club where there are perhaps bigger expectations and more pressure than there is at Leicester, with the greatest of respect to them. And he has played down expectations. I think people were, before he'd even arrived, because we paid £28 million for him, people were putting William Saliba on a pedestal. It's like, this guy's going to come in and he is going to be the guy to fix our defense. And it was never realistic.
No.
Yeah, so I think perhaps they're being very cautious with him, because at 19, you're still very young as a central defender. Very, very young. Gabriel, who's come in and done very well, is still young at 22, but he went to Dinamo Zagreb and he had a loan at a French side as well. So, maybe we just have to step back and look at what he is and who he is, and not the price tag. And it's difficult because the price tag, you like to think it informs you a little bit about the player. If you pay £2 million for a player, you go, well, whatever, £2 million, young player, we'll see how he goes. A Mavropanos, for example. Rob Holding, yeah. But when you pay £28 million for an 18-year-old, how can you not sort of read something into that? Because that's not the kind of deal Arsenal usually do. So I think that fed into it. So I think, as much as possible, I know it's not easy, we kind of have to separate the price tag from him and then just see what happens this season, if he might be involved at Premier League level. I mean, if we get an injury in the game against Rapid Vienna, if Luiz and Gabriel play in that game, for example, and we get an injury, he might have to play in the Premier League because we don't have anyone else fit. So It's a strange one. It is a strange one.
Yeah, Marie, I think, is back in full training this week, if not already. So he's still got to build up that match fitness. But
Yeah.
yeah, we are. It's funny because we talked at the start of the season about how we have a plethora of centre backs. Like we could not have more if we tried, and yet all of a sudden we don't have any. So
it's typically Arsenal, isn't it? To have more centre halves than you know what to do with, and you've only got one or two available. So
yeah, you run out. It's funny, isn't it? It's weird that like, the age thing with Saliba was like he's 19 years old, just turned that from 18, and in my mind at that age, if you're of the quality that the club sees him to be, minutes are imperative, and you need to give him minutes. And I suppose the under-23s can provide him that, and it's a fairly competitive system. The under-23, the Premier League 2, whatever they call it these days, and. I mean, to the point where we can play Willock and Nelson and Smith Rowe and Saliba and still draw 3-3 against Manchester United's youth side. So it will be competitive. I just have the concerns that he won't develop as quickly as maybe he could have done if he'd have gone. And to be fair, what this has given us, slightly amusing, slightly worrying, depending on your personality, I suppose, is the friction between us and Saint-Etienne now with Claude Puel completely blasting Arsenal's use of Saliba, saying, "Why aren't you using him?" He's
well, I mean that might tell you that might tell you a little bit that they think he's ready. If Saint-Etienne wanted him, they would have played him. They obviously think he's a very good player. They valued him highly enough, didn't they, for us to pay what we paid for him? So yeah, look, it's a weird situation. I can't help but worry a little bit that Mikel Arteta has more reservations about him than he's expressed publicly.
Yeah.
And again, that's not to say that I don't think he's never going to make it or never going to be good enough. But I just suspect from what Arteta has said, he's quite cautious about using him. And if he viewed sending him on loan as the best thing for him, rather than giving him minutes at Arsenal and giving him minutes on the training ground and coaching and specific coaching for him, I just have some doubts in the back of my mind. But look, hopefully they'll be dispelled and he'll come good and what have you. But I think it's reasonable to say that, we're not where we thought we were going to be with Saliba right now.
Yeah, I think that it'd be very, very hard to find someone who expects it to be in this situation this late, this early still into the season. Last time we spoke, we were kind of embroiled in the madness of the transfer window. Things looked very uncertain still. I'm not even sure Gabriel had signed by that point either. So a lot happened. We signed Thomas Partey in the end, which is huge. It's the player that I wanted. It's the player that I did about 16 million videos breaking him down with different Spanish experts, and I'm thrilled that he's here. He didn't play against Manchester City until right towards the end. He could play in Vienna. He could to get sort of those minutes and integrate. Do you think it would be wise to play him in this game to kind of get him integrated and ready for the Premier League, or is it still, do you think we should be saving him for that Premier League game at the weekend?
Well, I think what was interesting about why he didn't play was not a question of fitness, because he's been playing for Atletico all season. He played for Ghana, so maybe there was an element of fatigue, perhaps. I don't quite know, international travel. But I think what kept him out of the team was the fact that Mikel Arteta was quite specific about saying there are things he has to learn in systems and game plans and that kind of stuff. So it would make some sense to me if we're going to play in a similar way on Thursday night against Rapid Vienna, as we will on Sunday against Leicester. You could give Partey 60 minutes, 70 minutes in that to sort of get him in and get him used to, and sort of, if there are things he's not getting, you can then point to 55 minutes on the video and say, look, when that happens, you need to be here, whatever it might be. So I think there's some sense in playing him in the Europa League, to be honest. It doesn't mean he won't be able to play against Leicester on Sunday. I know Sunday is, it seems short, but the players are used to that kind of schedule anyway. So you don't have to run him into the ground for 90 minutes, but I think it would give him a good outing in his first start for the club. And, hopefully it would prepare him then for the game against Leicester on Sunday.
You talk about Partey needing to learn the system, and that's quite fluid right now, what Arsenal's system is, because it seems to be going through this kind of phase of transition. Arteta using a back three to compensate for the lack of real quality. I look at Gabriel and think we've now got a centre-back of real quality that could enable us to go to a back four, even if it meant one of Luiz or Holding or Mustafi or Saliba in the future playing next to him. And that then changes the dynamic of the midfield, going to three in midfield. And although we've spent nearly 200 odd million quid on a front line with Aubameyang, Lacazette and Pepe, even those three don't seem solidified in their roles and where they're going to be, especially the striking position now, with Aubameyang arguably being the person that maybe could go central. Let's start with the midfield before we go into the front line then. With Partey coming in, some people see him as a replacement or an upgrade on Granit Xhaka. Some people see him as a partner for Granit Xhaka. El Neni has returned from his Turkish loan on a different player in my mind to the one that left for Turkey. And then you've got Dani Ceballos as well there, who's played kind of deeper, but for Real Betis and Real Madrid played in a more creative, forward-thinking role. How do you, in your mind, mould that midfield three together?
Yeah, okay, so assuming we are going to play midfield three, do you play one anchoring the midfield, someone like Partey, and then two ahead of him, or do you play a two and play one ahead of him? I'm not quite sure, but I think the options are interesting. You could fashion some good combinations. I think Partey and Xhaka with Ceballos ahead. You could play Partey with Ceballos and Saka perhaps ahead of them if you want to use Saka as part of the midfield three, which I think he's more than capable of. Even though I'm sort of anxious to see him play on the left side of the front three. Yeah. To be honest, El Neni is a tidy player. He doesn't give you a huge amount in terms of progression, but what he gives you is some security at the back, and he'll pass the ball well. If that allows Partey to be a bit more expansive in his game, and I think we saw in some of the interviews and some of the stuff that we heard just after his arrival, that maybe he felt a little bit limited at Atletico with the job that he was doing. He feels he's capable of doing more in midfield than he was either allowed or what Diego Simeone wanted from him. So, is there the possibility of Partey playing as part of a two behind somebody like Xhaka or El Neni sitting? I just don't know. It'll be very interesting to see what sort of combinations Mikel Arteta has got in mind. The fixtures that we've got coming up are tricky, obviously, with Leicester coming up in the Premier League, Man United coming up in the Premier League as well. But I'm keen to see us play with a back four more often. I'm keen to see us play with an extra man in midfield more often, because I know we can talk about the lack of creativity, and in some ways people think the cure for that, or the magic button for that, is to just sort of bring in a creative player in the transfer market and just put him in the team and Arsenal will be creative. Yeah. I mean, that could work. There's no question about that. But perhaps you could be a more creative team if you have more possession in the opposition half, if you play the game more in the opposition half, if you've got the players, who are capable of dominating possession and putting pressure on the opponents in their own half. Can you find other ways of being creative? It doesn't have to be the guy who slots the ball through the eye of a needle. It can be through movement. You can become more creative by your movement and by what you do off the ball as much as on the ball. So those are things that I think we can work on, and to have maybe 5-6 players pushing further forward might ease some of the creative issues that we have. So I'm curious to see what he does, and how Partey is part of that.
Yeah, the Partey's role really intrigues me because, as you say, he was kind of shackled, I suppose. He was still very expressive, I felt, in an Atletico Madrid midfield, the way that he broke the lines, beat the press, drove the ball forwards, connected that defensive line to kind of the final third of the opposition's half. And when you see players like him in their national sides, who are usually national teams which aren't necessarily the best on the whole, but have kind of these standout players, I kind of use David Alaba as an example for Austria not so much more recently, but especially when he was younger. He was clearly the best player in the Austrian team. He was a left back at Bayern Munich, and then played in kind of even a number 10 role for Austria. So, and that kind of happens with Thomas Partey as well, plays in more advanced. And we saw, even though they didn't have the best game against Mali, when they played against Qatar, he got 2 assists, playing with a more expressive role, and he got 2 assists that way. So I think that there's scope for him to play more expressively. I think we've got the players in El Neni or Xhaka to enable that as well, playing next to him. He was kind of always in the midfield at Atletico with either Saul, who is kind of forward-thinking. He's kind of box-to-box, but he's definitely forward-thinking, or Koke. So there is scope for Partey to be that kind of expressive player in the midfield for sure. And I think it adds that certain level of dynamism that we've missed, and kind of acceleration that we've missed as well.
I think Arteta said that, didn't he? Sorry, he did talk about Partey being able to allow us to play in ways that we didn't. The qualities that he has allows us to be perhaps a bit more flexible within games, and to sort of shift formations within games, and maybe shift formations overall or from game to game a bit more. So yeah, I'm excited about what he's going to bring, and I think he'll be an important part of what we do this season.
The front line is strange to me. It's arguably more strange than the midfield right now. You've got Lacazette and Nketiah, who are the striking options for us, but Aubameyang played, I thought, a really interesting game against Sheffield United in that central role. We've not seen him there for a long, long time. You've got the emergence of Saka as well, who I would love to see him just really kind of nail down at one of those front three positions as well. I think that we've got someone there that is a real special talent, and it's amazing that he's come out of completely nowhere from 2 years ago. He was kind of in the youth on the periphery of maybe getting some minutes in the team, playing in the Europa League, and he's absolutely smashed it now. So, and then Pepe, whenever I talk about Pepe, I get frustrated because I can't, it doesn't matter that he cost that money to a lot of people, but for me, it's very hard to get your mind over £72 million. In my mind. And then you've got Willian, who against Fulham looked like the next Lionel Messi, just setting up plays, being the creative force on that right-hand side, and has since kind of failed to impress, and a lot of people are getting kind of frustrated with the lack of lack of protagonistic displays we've seen from him maybe. But how do you fit that front three together, and what do you think could the long-term plan be?
I'd really like to see Aubameyang down the middle. I know the way Mikel Arteta wants his team to play at the moment demands something from the strikers, which isn't really compatible with Aubameyang's game. It feels like a bit of a waste to ask him to do some of the things he's asked Lacazette and Nketiah to do, just to run around and to chase and to be that first line, that first man in the press, etc., etc. But maybe we need to rethink what we ask from our striker. We have a world-class centre forward, and we're not using him there. I mean, the decision to play Willian there against Man City was too clever by half. I'm not to be very kind about it. It didn't work. I don't think Willian was good, but then I don't think Willian is capable of playing that role. Like, he certainly didn't give us anything more than Lacazette or Nketiah would have given us in that situation. And I wonder if maybe Arteta was expecting more from Willian because of his experience, and perhaps because of his, I don't want to say he's a really creative player, but he is certainly somebody who can operate in the final third effectively, and has done for Chelsea and has done for Brazil. But it's frustrating when you have a world-class centre forward and you see him on the left and you've got Willian playing in that position, So I think what we're seeing from Bukayo Saka and what we saw against Manchester City was a guy basically saying, look, I'm here, I'm good enough, I've been Arsenal's best player on the day against Man City, against a very, very difficult team to play against. I was the best player. You have to keep me in the team. Now, where do you keep me? Where do you keep me in the team? Left wing back, he can do it. We know he can do it. But if we're talking about shifting formations, if we're talking about using three in midfield, if we're talking about a front three, I would love to see Saka in that front three. I would love to see Aubameyang down the centre. And then is it Pepe or is it Willian on the right-hand side? I struggle with Willian, but part of me understands that it's only been 4 or 5 Premier League games so far this season, and 2 of them have been against Liverpool and Man City. So I'm not sure that Willian was brought in to really make the difference in those games. I think perhaps he was brought in to give us a bit more in the other games. He was very good against Fulham, but then I think quite a lot of that is down to Fulham not being anywhere near good enough for the Premier League this season. So if it were me, I'd have Aubameyang down the middle. I really would. And it would change the way that we have to play. It would change the emphasis of the way that we play, and we could get Pepe there. Like you, I struggle with the 72 million. I think we overpaid by a considerable margin. That is a price tag which weighs him down and weighs down what people think about him. Because, like we were saying about Saliba, it's very difficult to separate the two things because your expectation levels are informed by how much you pay for a player. He will, I think, always be, whether it's fair, unfair, or somewhere in the middle, £72 million Nicolas Pepe. That's who he's always going to be. And we see flashes of the talent, but perhaps not enough consistency. I'm not sure that our right-hand side functions as well as it could either. But, ultimately play our best centre forward at centre forward and then work backwards. That would be my thinking on the front three.
On the Pepe kind of price, to me, it's always, he's a victim not only of the price, but of the team that paid that price, because Arsenal are known for not paying anywhere. Maximum we kind of go to is around the £50 million mark, and when it's that amount of money, it's for a world-class player like Aubameyang, or taking the punt on a proven goal scorer in Lacazette at Lyon. And you look at the likes of Manchester United or Chelsea, like these are teams that spend big on players quite often. Like people often forget how much Luke Shaw cost, or how much Lindelof cost, or how much like these players cost, because
Angel Di Maria, for example.
50 to 60 odd million he costs. So they get swallowed up amongst other massive signings. But when Pepe's in a front line that consists of, say, a youth product like Saka, or a free transfer like Willian, he's playing in front of another youth talent like Bellerin, playing with a midfield that El Neni was £6 million, Sabas is on loan, Xhaka cost a decent amount of money, and Arsenal have gradually kind of stepped up the amount of the entire worth of, say, their 11, but it doesn't stack up, and 72 million does stand out. And I look at, I have a lot of friends who watch a lot of Liga, and they feel like we should have gone for Bamba at Lille instead, who's on the other side and is having a very good season at Lille this season. But it's always with the benefit of hindsight, of course. But he needs to have sort of minutes. Willian coming in has kind of limited him in a way, and I think Arteta's put a lot of emphasis on his experience that he's had coming in from Chelsea. But it means that we've also got depth now in the team as we approach kind of this Europa League group stage, and then Leicester and Manchester United after it. Just as kind of like a final point to touch on before we wrap things up, this Europa League game and then the Leicester game, how do you kind of foresee us rotating players in both of those fixtures?
Like defensively, we do have a few options. At fullback, obviously, you can bring in Kolasinac, you can bring in Maitland-Niles, you can bring in Cedric. But I think we're a bit snookered at the centre of defence because we've only got Luiz and Gabriel fit, which is a bit scary because, you can look at it from one point of view. It's like, well, it's just another game. It gives him more time. It gives him more fitness and sharpness, and it gets him more up to speed. But, if you lose Gabriel or you lose Luiz, it's a really tricky one for Mikel Arteta. I don't think any of the players who've been long-term injured are close enough for a comeback for Sunday, or certainly for Thursday, unless there's a surprise in there. So I think we're a little bit, that's a problem, I think, and not one that I envy Mikel Arteta having. Ahead of that, we can do all kinds of things. You can bring in El Neni, you can play Partey, like we said. You can bring in Joe Willock, you can bring in Reece Nelson, Eddie Nketiah, Lacazette can start, Pepe can start, Willian could even start again. So there's plenty of options. I think it'll be a slightly stronger team than people might think, because I suspect Arteta will want to start developing some fluency, some attacking fluency. And if you pick 11 brand new players, it's difficult to sort of instill continuity in performances, So I think it'll be there'll be some rotation, perhaps not as much as we like to think. And I think what's interesting is that the Leicester and United games are ones, if you can look at the City game and compartmentalize it and whatever issues people might have with the performance, it can't be any surprise that we got beaten by Man City. But where we really need to step up, and I think where we really need to start showing that the progress is being made, is games like Leicester, games like United, teams who are sort of on our level, there or thereabouts, who are all more or less on the same level. These are games which could go a long way to deciding whether we can finish in the top 4 and in the Champions League places. Take points off these teams, and they're really very valuable points, Yeah. So cliche of going game by game is, I'm not going to trot that out, but I think he'll rotate for Thursday. Won't be quite as much rotation, or quite as young a team as people might expect. And then I think he'll pick as strong a team as he possibly can for Sunday against Leicester, because that is a game which I think we can, if we play well and if we perform well and get the right result, make a little bit of a statement and dispel some of the doubts that people have had after the City game.
Yeah, it's fingers crossed about just keeping up the form now. We've arguably, in the first 5 games of the season, got the 2 hardest ones out of the way in Anfield and the Etihad. So that's a positive to look at. But as you say, these 2 games are the barometers. The games against Leicester, United, Chelsea, Wolves even, are going to be those games where we sort of really stack up and see where we measure. Thank you, Andrew. Much appreciate your time this morning. Tell people where they can find you and what you're going to be up to.
The usual place, Arseblog, arseblog.com, Arseblog on Twitter, and, doing all the usual stuff, podcasts and the whole lot. So, it's all there. It's all there.
Lovely stuff. We will see you again very, very soon. If you haven't already checked it out, we did a preview show for the Rapid Vienna game with Wolfgang Gasperit, the football manager, researcher for Austria and Germany. So make sure you check that one out if you haven't already. But other than that, it's been a pleasure to speak to you as it always has. And as always, up the Arsenal.